We began with a broad overview of what Kabbalah is and what it's not. We said that at its heart, Kabbalah seeks to identify and reveal the underlying patterns of Torah and all of existence. And if we understand those patterns correctly, then we can use them in a certain sense as like a periodic table of reality. And we can therefore begin to identify those patterns in everyday life, as well as in mitzvahs and in our own inner psychology. Last week, we began with the most fundamental pattern, which is the duality of all of the universe. We have, on the one hand, chesed, the desire to expand, give, be one with things. And on the other hand, the aspect of gevura, which is the force that contracts, creates discipline, holds back. We said that from a creation point of view, the whole reason for our being here is because God had the desire to give of himself, and that's the creative urge. But of course, like every good, nurturing parent or teacher, you need to be able to hold back enough so that the student can develop themselves and their own identity. If there's too much of you, there's not enough of them. But if there's not enough of you, then they lose their connection to their source. So we're constantly toying with and working with the balance between these two forces in the universe. We said that this has practical applications to parenting. Of course, it has practical applications in things like politics, that these are the two components of liberal and conservative, and if you don't have one of them, or if one of them is in an unhealthy place, then the whole society becomes out of balance. Tonight, I want to go one step further. We're going to add one more dimension to this pattern, which is the pattern of threes. So we're going to see that there are many places in the Torah that refer to a pattern of threes, and we're going to try to understand what this pattern represents on a deep level, and then how we can apply it, as I mentioned earlier, in two major areas. Number one is how to identify different personality types, and number two is how to understand our own psychology and how we process and integrate information. So you'll notice that I'm going in terms of numbers, and I'm not going to do, I could do a different number every week. Like this week we could do 3, and next week we could do 4, and we know that threes, give me a list of some famous threes in the Torah, patterns of 3. 3. Okay, so the 3 patriarchs. What else? That's the wrong religion. 3 wise men, although they probably took it from us. Yeah. And by the way, in case you were wondering, Christians know Kabbalah as well. And so when they talk about the Trinity, they're actually using these kabbalistic concepts in order to give credibility to their ideas. So what else in Judaism? 3s. Any 3s?
Oh, the 3 things of Shabbat.
What are the 3 things of Shabbat? 3 meals.
Well, yeah, but
3 meals on Shabbat, absolutely.
Candles, something.
Those are 2 candles. We got 2 candles.
Like there's 3 stages.
Okay.
I can't remember.
3 stages. Well, there's the night, there's the morning, and then there's the... Right, well, there's 3. Okay, 3 times a day we pray. Very good. Well done. What else?
It would have been 3 sacrifices back in the day.
Yeah, so that corresponds to the 3 times a day that we pray. Exactly. And it does as well as that's right, Nikita knows his Talmud, right? Abraham invented or instituted Shachris, Yitzchak Mincha, and Yaakov Mariv. What else? 3s in the Torah.
3 minhagim. Pesach, Shabbat, Sukkot.
3 regalim.
Yeah.
Yes. A minhag is a custom, but
Chagim.
3 chagim. Oh, 3 chagim, right. So 3 regalim, 3 times that all the Jewish people would come to Jerusalem, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. What else?
3 stars for Shabbat.
Oh, when you see 3 stars in the sky. Yeah, very good. Okay, very good. What's that? Hold on, I can't hear.
Cutting a child's hair at 3.
Oh, okay, so that's interesting. So that's, so the Arizal speaks about the origin of the Sharon. Oops, Sharon. The Sharon is a custom that he based off of the concept of Orla. So in the land of Israel, we know that there are lots of restrictions around agriculture that we just read about. And one of the restrictions is that any fruit-bearing tree, within the first 3 years, there's space for you, Sammy, come on in. Within the first 3 years of its bearing fruit, you cannot eat of the fruit. In the 4th year, you have to bring it to Jerusalem, and in the 5th year, you can eat it all year round. Now, and so they say that similarly, so too, in the first 3 years of a boy's life, you shouldn't cut the hair, and then after 3 years, you should. There is a little bit of controversy around that tradition because, interestingly, that tradition is also found in non-Jewish practices as well. There's an old Turkish tradition to wait until the boy is a certain age to cut his hair, and there's a Native American tradition as well to wait until the boy is a certain age to cut his hair. So the origins are unclear, but the Arizal, who's the founder of modern Kabbalah, certainly thought that it was a worthy tradition. So a lot of people observe it. Okay. Other times we have threes. How about Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, right? The entire written Torah, not just the Chumash, not just the 5 books of Moses, is divided into Torah, which is the Chumash, the Nevi'im, the writings, the prophets, and then the Ketuvim, which is Salt, Tehillim, and Mishlei, and right, and the Megillas, and all of that stuff. Great. How about what will be 3? There's supposed to be prophecy that there will be 3 Beis Hamikdashes, 3 temples, right? We've had 2 so far. And the 3rd one is supposed to be the last and final one. If we go into the oral Torah, we see a whole lot of things. Anyone here learned Perkei Avot? One of the first Mishnahs is, the world stands on 3 things.
Acts of kindness, Torah.
Torah,
Water.
not quite.
Acts of kindness. Yeah.
Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim, right? Torah, service, which is usually referring to prayer, and Gemilas Chasadim. So there's a whole lot. So what we'll see, by the way, also in rituals, 3 matzahs, right, at the Seder.
3 dayan at Beit Din.
That's 3 judges on a Beit Din. So what we're going to see is that this pattern of 3s is always representing the same thing. Always representing the same thing. So when we observe, so when we talk about the numbers, we know that everything begins with 1. And I told you last time that we're going to save 1 for the end because oneness is the hardest thing to grasp. That's why Aleph has no sound, because it cannot be spoken about. But we'll try at some point, once we've gone through everything else. Now, from there's going to be a process, an order that we go through. Things begin in unity, then they break off into duality, and then after that, you see a stage that goes from oneness to duality to 3. Now, in the process, in any process, 3, even outside of Kabbalah or whatever, we see that 3 is what allows for a certain type of balance. So as soon as you have a duality, so you have something on this side and you have something on that side, the 3rd element of any, let's say, of any set is what allows you to have a middle point, so to speak, right? If we're thinking mathematically, right? So as soon as you have a set of 3 of anything, you can have let's say, a beginning, a middle, and an end. As opposed to having 2 things on either side, conceptually, the 3rd point is always the thing that creates the harmony between the 2. So that's what 3 represents on the most abstract level. So when we observe that happening in a process, what it looks like is this. Something begins in unity, it breaks off in a certain sense into disunity, and the 3rd stage is always seeing how those 2 separate parts can actually be balanced with each other in the 3rd. What do I mean? Let's think about it like this. Day 1 of creation, God creates light, right? It's totally non-physical. Day 2, what is created on day 2? Not quite. You're right, one of them is right.
Heavens.
The heavens and?
The universe, like the solar system.
So the heavens and the upper waters and the lower waters, right? The heavens and the water, right? You can, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but you can remember that the first 3 days correspond to the second set of 3 days, right? Day 1 is light and dark. Day 4 is sun and moon. Day 2 is heaven and water. Day 5 is birds and fish. Day 3 is everything that grows on the land and the grass and the trees, and day 6 is all the land animals, right? So these things follow in a pattern. Day 2 is created basically the rakia, the firmament, that which separates between the upper and the lower parts. Yeah? It's basically just separation. So two-ness at its heart always represents fracture, fragmentation, disunity, which is why the Zohar and deeper texts say that on day 2 is created things like machlokas, like dispute, conflict, argument. The ability to have separation is created on day 2. But day 3 is the day when that is all reconciled together. Okay? So now, I want to make this a little bit even more tangible. The order of 3 always shows you a certain pattern in which things are created. Okay? Now, this is going to draw on some of the things that we spoke about last time. All right? So the first force, the first element that has to be brought into any type of creative activity is what? The first power has to be, of any creative process,
Ideas.
Giving.
is giving, right? Is the desire to create, the desire to expand. Yeah? That's step 1. Step 1 is just, I want to create something, anything, right? I just want to put it onto paper. Step 2, once you have that amazing, beautiful, incredible idea, what do you do after that? Well, you have, what?
Come up with a plan to do it.
Okay, you have to define it, right? You have to say, all right, I have this epiphany, right? I can't even put it into words. I had an idea for a business or a song or a new prototype or a website or an essay, anything. Oh, I've got it. But then once you've got it, you actually have to put it down onto paper. So that's going to require what? Constraint, right? Discipline, weeding out what it is from what it's not. That's usually the really, really hard part. For artists, step 2 is always the most painful because the thing that you had in your head is always going to be infinitely better than what you put down on the page, right? Because step 1 was just, in theory, it was all expansive. It was larger than any note or word that you could use to express it. Step 2 is when you have to make this painful sacrifice of saying, okay, there's some things that just cannot be a part of it, and I need to make it real and tangible in this world. Step 3 is then going to be, okay, I've got the expansion and then I've got the contraction, but now I need to create that balance and that harmony between the two in order to make sure that it lasts, that it stays there. Because as we said before, if I have one extreme, it won't stay. If I have another extreme, it also won't last. So far, so good? Okay, so now I want to take this 3-stage idea and start plugging it in and see how this works out, in all these cases that we spoke about before. So let's say we're talking about the creation of, the Jewish people. So we have 3 personalities, 3 major personalities in that creation. We have Avram. What's Avram's fundamental quality, his attribute?
Chesed.
Giving, chesed, tent open on all 4 sides. I look for anyone and everyone that I can give to, and I want to expand and grow. He's the one who has the first initial seed of an idea of what it even means to be a practical, ethical monotheist. Right? Monotheism existed before Abraham, but he was the first one to kind of bring it out into the world and to actually live it and express it. Okay, fantastic. But there's a problem with Abraham. He's giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. He doesn't quite lack the staying power. He doesn't quite have the staying power of being able to keep things in place, which is why there's one Talmudic passage. It's a very difficult passage to say that it says every one of the converts that Abraham made didn't remain. They all left. Because they were so enthusiastic and so excited and so overwhelming and gushing, but they didn't quite have the constraints. There's a more contemporary figure who some of you have probably heard of, I'm not sure if I should name him or not. He was a very, very larger-than-life individual Jewish person in the 20th century who brought many, many people to passion for their Judaism through his music. A lot of his followers did not remain because it was so limitless and so without boundaries that they couldn't actually maintain that discipline, especially after he died. Okay, so who do you need to come onto the scene in order to add a little bit of spice and salt and a little bit of structure? And who's that? Yitzchak. What's Yitzchak's primary attribute? Gevurah, which means holding back. Like we said last week, the binding of Isaac literally represents Isaac's desire to want to nullify himself, to say, I'm going to make myself smaller, I'm going to contract. That's who Isaac was at heart. Okay, fantastic. Except the same Talmudic passage says, Isaac's disciples didn't remain within the fold. Why? Because they were all condensed, structured, disciplined. They all sticks up their, right? These people couldn't take a joke. They couldn't, they had no flexibility. They were too rigid. As we see with people who don't want to grow with the times, who don't have a sense of playfulness, who don't want to, expand a little bit, right? Everything is about the rules. Okay. Fantastic. So finally we get to Yaakov. Jacob. And interesting that we're named after Jacob, right? Yisrael. That's who we are. Now Jacob takes the best of his father and the best of his grandfather and he puts them into one. On the one hand, Jacob is very much a inner-oriented human being. One of the first things that he's described as is someone who dwells in tents. He's always sitting, inner meditation, and whereas his brother Esav was this outgoing jock, he was a little bit of a bookworm. Okay, but then again, he's kicked out of his house and he says, you have to go out into the wider world, have families, go work, right? Go feed people, go help people. And so Yaakov, it's an interesting discussion whether this was supposed to be part of the original plan or not, but Yaakov is forced to take upon himself both of the attributes of expansive giving as well as discipline. And so Yaakov is the one who represents what's often called the attribute of emes, of truth, and I'll explain in a second why that's called truth. But what that means is he's the person who makes whatever we are sustainable. He's the person who gives it form. And interestingly, one of the ways that you can tell that this is true is that Abraham had 2 children. One of them clearly carried on his father's legacy and one of them did not. Yitzchak had 2 children and the same thing happened with them. And the reason why is because Abraham was so to one side of giving. His one child was a corruption of his attribute. So if Abraham was the epitome of giving, so Yishmael, it is said of Yishmael in the verses, it says, his hand will be in everything, right? He's got his business in everything. It really meant he was going to be a thief, right? But what that means is that you have no boundaries. The corruption of chesed is that you fail to create boundaries. You fail to respect who other people are. You fail to have that discipline. On the other hand, Yitzchak, he was all internal, he was all disciplined, right? But what happens when you get too hard and cut with the rules? You basically impose too much law in the world. And that's who Esav was. He was a killer. It says he'll live by your sword, right? So somebody who everything has to be to the nth degree of justice, the corruption of that is bloodshed. It's bloodshed. So everyone had, if you were to one extreme, one of your children was going to be an extreme corruption of whatever you possessed. But who were Yaakov's children? Every single one of them turned out to be great people. And the reason why is because when you're balanced, when you contain a mixture of both of those elements, you create something that lasts, something that can be passed down, something that is sustainable. And that's how Yisrael is created. And he is the center point. Often people say that Yisrael is actually a conjugation of Yashar, Kale, right? Yashar meaning straight to God. And the idea being that you have Abraham is to one side and Yitzchak is to the other side, and the middle path, the Yashar path, the straight path is Yaakov. So we see this playing out in when it comes to the avos. And of course, you see this again in every place that we see the number 3. And I'm not sure how many of these we have to go through, but let's say we go with Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Okay, how do these 3 things work? Somebody plug it in for me. What's Pesach represent? You do the work, I'm going to eat my salad.
Freedom.
What?
Freedom.
Freedom,
Access.
expansion, right? Being free from boundaries.
Chesed.
Absolute chesed. Why is it Why is it chesed? Ooh, that went down the wrong pipe.
Because you mentioned expansion.
Okay, yes. But where do we see chesed in Pesach?
Giving not enough. No, I don't know.
Okay, so this is interesting. So this is this week's Torah portion, right? The Jewish people did not deserve to be redeemed. When we talk about chesed, real giving is giving regardless of the merit of the receiver, right? The Jewish people did not deserve to be taken out of Egypt. They were idolaters. They did no mitzvahs. They were gone, right? It was an absolute act of pure giving that God took them out. He did everything for them. He said, you don't worry about a thing. You just go. Now contrast that with the next Chag, which is Shavuot. What's Shavuot?
Kabbalah.
Why? Why is Shavuot discipline and restraints and holding back? What's Shavuot?
Because they were waiting for the
I
Torah.
thought Sukkot. You're restricted in the Sukkah.
Why do you say that?
You're restricted in the Sukkah.
So you'll see why Sukkah is both.
Okay.
Yeah. What is Shavuot? What are we commemorating on Shavuot?
Taking on
The giving of the
Torah.
law, guys. Come on, the law. You can't get more disciplined than that. You just got handed.
That's Hesed.
And you gotta stay up.
It's
Giving.
so
You
it's
also eat dairy. It's Hesed.
It's a straight
it is a representation fundamentally of it. Everything's coming from Chesed. Remember, everything that God does, its source is in love, right? But there is a disciplined love. There's a tough love when your parent says, come, I'm going to teach you how to follow a recipe so that you know how to cook for yourself. Come, I'm going to teach you how to ride a bicycle, and it requires you have to pay attention to this, and you have to do that, and you can't do that. So that's all coming from love. But what is the giving of the Torah? It's the imposition of law, of constraint, of discipline. And then, of course, you have Sukkot. Now, Sukkot is an interesting one because that is supposed to be a harmony of the two. Why is Sukkot a harmony of the two?
Giving time to relax.
Okay, so there is something nice about that. By the way, also Shavuot is also justice because we earned it, right? For 50 days, the Jewish people were, and this is why we count the Omer, they were working on themselves. They were building up to something until they got to a level where they actually deserved what they got. Now, Sukkot is the time when we bring in all of our produce, right? It's the harvest festival. So, what's a farmer? What's his relationship to the things that he or she produces?
A farmer by their mere their mere aim in life is to take from the ground.
Okay, so on the one hand, they worked very hard, right?
And they also put back in the ground.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, but does a farmer did they make the fruit? Did a farmer make the fruit?
No.
Yes.
Yes and no.
So
Right? On the one hand, they worked very hard, but on the other hand, they don't create seeds. They can't bring rain. So it's a combination of both chesed, the kindness of God bringing rain and sunshine and fertile ground, but also us putting in our effort as well. And so it's a combination of those two things. And in other ways as well, Sukkot represents this theme of balance, of both discipline as well as kindness. And so you see this in every single instance where you have the number 3. Now, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, who was a rabbi in the 20th century, who during World War II actually lived in England, said that at the heart of every human being, everyone has a personality that fits one of these three categories. Everyone has at their source, he calls it, you're either an Avraham, a Yitzchak, or a Yaakov. Because there, you cannot have more than three qualities in this universe. You have one side to the right, one side to the left, and one center side. And he says what it looks like is this. There are some people who get so much energy from being other-minded, from giving to others, from socializing, and their eyes are constantly outward, and the way they define themselves is in the relationship to other people. That's the Avraham personality. You have Yitzchak, who says they are totally inward-oriented. Everything is about what am I, what's how can I make myself more in line with with the universe, and how can I go deep and work on myself and develop myself, right? These people are usually incredibly meditative people. That's a Yitzchak. How can I nullify myself? How can I give space to other people? That's a Yitzchak. And they define themselves by the center of their identity is inward focused. The third one is neither relationship focused nor inward focused. You can imagine the center of their identity would be like objectivity. It would be, okay, in any given situation, what's meant to happen right now? Right? Sometimes I should give, sometimes I should go inwards, sometimes I should go outwards, but it's not a subjective point of view, it's a more objective point of view. And that's why I've said that Yaakov is often referred to as truth, partially because truth is defined by that which is always true. There are those who probably have heard this before, but the word in Hebrew for truth is emet, which its letters are the first, middle, and last letter of the alphabet, right? Which means something that is expansively true always is truth, right? Truth is something that lasts. So the truthful personality is neither outward focused nor inward focused, but is somewhere objectively between the two. And so what you'll often find is the Avraham personality. If you ask them, what's the one mitzvah you love the most? They're like, chesed, I love helping people, giving to people, tzedakah. I had a friend in yeshiva who he was my roommate, and I couldn't understand him. I just couldn't get him. For the first couple months I was like, who is this guy? He rolled out of bed in the morning, came down to the shul in his Batman pajamas, and I'm like, have some respect, man, We're standing in front of God, we're praying, be respectable. And I was like, what is he doing? So then one day I'm sitting in my room writing or something, and he comes and he's like, Moshe, we gotta go. I'm like, where are we going? He says, come on, the Reubens are moving. I was like, okay. He's like, we gotta help them. Like, help them what? He's like, move, we're gonna move all this stuff. I'm like, wow. And then it hit me. I was like, I couldn't believe it. He is total chesed. Everything he's thinking about is other-oriented, which means the one thing he's not thinking about is how he's dressed. Like, that's the first thing from his mind. He's so outward-oriented, and I, by nature, am probably more of a Yitzchak, meditate, transcendence type of personality. I was like, yeah, but let me work on myself, and yeshiva is time for me to develop myself. And him is like, no, I'm here to serve you, right? So if you ask the Avram personality, if you could take on one mitzvah, it would be chesed. If you ask the Yitzchak personality, what's one mitzvah that you would like to do all day, it would be, what would I do? What would a Yitzchak personality, an inward, wants to nullify himself and be one with all of, the universe?
Fast.
Meditate. Prayer, right? Just standing there, feet together, standing before the divine, thinking about how small I am, right? That's my idea of a good time. Okay? So what would the one thing that a Yaakov personality would like to do? What's the one mitzvah that a Yaakov likes to do? Somebody who wants to know with exactitude what is the objectively right thing to do in any given situation.
Science.
Study Torah.
From a mitzvah point of view, by the way, learning science can also be a mitzvah, depending on how you use it. But studying Torah, studying law. Okay, now, Alan, Mishnah and Pirkei Avot. The world stands on three things. Prayer, acts of kindness, and Torah. Okay? So you see how these three things correspond to the three different types of personalities. The larger than the Avraham personality wants to expand and give to everyone. The Yitzchak personality wants to nullify himself in an ego death and transcend all of reality. The Yaakov wants to study the law and know exactly what is the right moral situation in any given situation. And the question for you is going to be, well, where do I fit in that? Because if once you figure out who you are, where you're now, by the way, everyone can have more than one of these combinations, right? But at your source, you probably will have one of them, and then kind of your secondary trait will be maybe another one. So I don't want to get into it too much because it gets a little bit complicated. But at your essence, there's going to be something that you really resonate with. And what that allows you to do is, first of all, it tells you, what do you get energy from? What do you love doing? How are you going to figure out what your calling in life is going to be? Because it's got to be something that really activates that trait, that part of you. That's number one. But also it's going to help you to figure out, when I say to you, Isaac, we've got 45 minutes to learn something. What do you want to learn? So one person's going to say, I want to learn all about the laws of charity and giving, and okay. And another person's going to say, I want to learn about tefillah and meditation and Kabbalah. And a third person's going to say, I just want to learn Shulchan Aruch. Tell me, what do I do from when I wake up in the morning to when I go to bed at night, right? What blessing do I make on candied orange peels, right? That's going to be a Yaakov personality. So this is an incredibly useful and helpful paradigm for us to be able to kind of slot in our personalities. Now I want to take this in an entirely different direction in the remaining amount of time that we have. How much time do we have? 50.
9/11.
What?
10 past not again.
Okay, so what do we have, like 5 minutes? Yeah, okay. So 9:30 we finish, or 9:15? I can't remember. What? Great. Nikita, you and I are going to learn at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, okay. Now, there's another way of understanding this, but not from a personality trait point of view, but from a cognitive point of view. So these three stages also represent the ways in which we process information. So the way that we spoke about this process when it comes to creating something is also the way that we integrate knowledge. There are three types of knowledge, which have a very famous acronym, which some of you probably know. Chachma Bina Das, and the acronym is? Chabad. Chabad, hooray, right? Chabad represents three types of knowing, okay? Chachma, the Talmud says, is received wisdom. It's the raw equation, the knowledge before you've integrated it, before you've thought about it, you get an instant download. That's what Chachma is, okay? It's just knowing what is there. In fact, that's why the word Chachma is the same letters as Koach Ma, which means the power of what. It's just knowing what is. You have no idea how to work with it, how to do anything. Stage 2 is going to be Bina, which is going to be breaking it down, analysis, learning how to process that information. The word Bina coming from the word boneh, which means to build up. So you take things and you break them down into their component parts. You figure out how does it work. So you're given a physics equation, that's the Chachma. But knowing how does it apply and when does it apply and what consequences does it have, right? That's going to be Bina. The third stage of knowledge is going to be Das. Das essentially means integration. It means becoming one with something. So I can know the physics, the maths equation of gravity. I can then test it and see how gravity works in different situations, but not until I've fallen off of a high chair do I actually integrate the knowledge of what gravity actually is. So stage 3 is going to be, I understand it on such a fundamental experiential level that I'm one with that knowledge. Okay, now, how does this help us? So this helps you in a number of ways, but one of the best ways that it can help is the following, is if you ever want to figure out how to learn deeply a new piece of wisdom. Let's say I said to you, okay, take a saying, a phrase that you love, something that really speaks to you, right? A well-known phrase. Yeah, let's say for the sake of argument, we'll take something from Pirkei Avot, right? Which is, I don't know. Let's say from the Torah, right? Love your fellow like yourself. Love your fellow like yourself. Okay, fantastic. So, the first thing that I'm going to want to do is, I'm going to want to be at the stage of Chachma. Chachma is just knowing what it is, okay? I want to just have a tangential experience with it. I don't want to try to break it down. I want to just try to sear it into my brain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a meditation that was pioneered by Rabbi Yisrael Salanter in the 1800s, something called Hispilus. He would take a phrase, a Talmudic passage, something like that, something that inspired him, and he would repeat it to himself over and over and over again with increasing levels of emotion, without getting into the depths of the passage, just the words themselves, letting them rattle around inside of him until it fills every corner of his being. Yeah? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. He would say that over and over and over and over and over again with deep, deep, deep conviction. Okay, that's stage one. Now it's burned into your brain. Step two is going to be, okay, let me go hit the books. Let me see what every commentary wise sage has ever said on the subject of loving your fellow like yourself. What does it mean? Li'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Well, to love your fellow like yourself, famously it means you have to love yourself first. Because I can't love someone else if I don't love myself. The reason why is because the definition of love is it's the expansion of the self. So how can I love you if I don't love myself? Amazing, mind-blowing, deep. How do I love someone else? What am I obligated in when I say that I have to love you like myself? Does it mean I have to give away all of my money to you? Does it mean that I give away my last bottle of water if we're two starving people in the desert? No. It doesn't, actually. I have to take care of myself first, but I also have to love you to the extent that I would want to do for myself. So I have to be as happy for you when you get the right job as I would be happy for myself. I can't have any trace of jealousy or anything like that, right? This is all Nachmanides if you want to go look it up. All right? So good. I've studied the ins and outs of every part of what does it mean to love someone like yourself. Great. Step three is going to say, okay, now let me practice it. Let me experientially live what it means to love someone else like myself. Let me start easy. Pick a family member or pick a close friend and really spend time every day, 5 minutes every day, thinking about what do I love about that person and why am I happy for them, right? What are the blessings that I wish for them? That I would want them to have an amazing, incredible life, knowing that person, right? And then challenge yourself a little bit. Take somebody who you don't love so much yet and say, what's the good that I can see in that person? And how can I understand where they're coming from? And maybe they had a really tough life, or maybe they're cynical for a reason. And now let me try to have compassion for that person. And so now I'm experientially integrating what does it mean to love somebody like yourself. So with these three things, Chachma, Bina, Das, they follow the same exact pattern as what we were saying before. Because step one is just the idea. It's the most expansive vision of anything that you could have of loving somebody. Step two is breaking it down into its component parts. That's discipline. That's really putting in the work. But then step three is the balance of those two things, which is I have to be really amazed and inspired in what I do, but at the same time I have to analyze and figure out how to do it. The only way to do that is to integrate it inside of me and to actually live it and experience it. So every time I see this stage of threes, that's what I'm going to be thinking. That's what I'm going to be thinking. So now we have yet a new pattern of life and of existence that we can now put into practice and application. That we can find it in many, many different places in the Torah. We can find it in many different places of our own personalities. And we can also find it in the way that we that we integrate new pieces of information and knowledge and wisdom. So that is a tool in your tool belt. I hope you use it and I hope it's helpful. Thank you.